Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. The reports of Q's demise have been greatly exaggerated. We got some new Q posts for you, and I'm going to get right on them. Keep in mind, I always read these through first, and then I do the analysis afterwards. So if you want to skip through straight to that, just click on the timestamp below, and I'll immediately start talking about it. Here we go. Post 1682, July 24th, 45 minutes after the hour of 10. From sea to shining sea. Who does Hubert report to? Directly in brackets. Define evidence. Who has the server? Why does POTUS continually refer to the server? POTUS does not speculate. Future proves past. Who has it all? Topics stated in past. Future big meaning. Repeats important. Think Twitter. Those awake see. Those asleep blind. Fake news. In brackets, we have prop arm of D/DS. Failing. Panic. Silence is golden. Q. Post 1683. You have more than you know. And then we have a link. Q. And that's 38 minutes after the hour of 11. Post 1684. 50 minutes after the hour 11. We have a link to the Huffington Post. Panic. Q. 1685. Adding on to that, now do you understand why mirrors and disinformation is necessary? Logical thinking, 20 in brackets, Q. Post 1686, 28 minutes after the hour of 12. We have a YouTube link. Does FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, cover FISA? No. In brackets, FISA, highest level of classification. How does FOIA generate redacted FISA? Page in brackets. D-class? Who declass? Section 5.2, classification. Then in the brackets, we have Office of President. Why redacted? Think Huber. Where we go one, we go all. Q. And the Office of President is in brackets. Post 1687. 11 minutes after the hour of 1, we have this older post from May 15th showing a bunch of links. And Q adds on saying, all for a baseless conspiracy. Enjoy the show. Sample. 2 in brackets. And then we have a handful of links. Something big is about to drop. Q. 1688. 19 minutes after the hour of 1 p.m. Responding to an Anon who puts plus and this YouTube link. Q says there is no greater current in brackets threat to the American people than the fake news media. Hashtag controlled MSM. Study Nazism. Compare/contrast Antifa. Compare/contrast socialism push. Push for rebirth. Who financed then? Who is financing now? Dark to light. Good wins. Q. Post 1689. Responding to an Anon who says Q marker. This is 24 minutes after the hour of 1. Q says we do try. Post 1690, 28 minutes after the hour of 1 p.m. You are watching the systematic destruction of the old guard. Power will return to the people. Q. And post 1691, 39 minutes after the hour of 1. We saw you. God bless patriots. There's a Reddit link. Q. Post 1692, we have a Twitter link. And Q says, what a wonderful day. Do you believe in coincidences? Q. That's 31 minutes after the hour of 2. All right, let's take you back to the first post. Post 1682. From sea to shining sea. And of course, that's from America the Beautiful. That turns out to be a Q proof. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But it is also relevant to this post as well. Let's move on. Who does Huber report to directly? Well, that would be Jeff Sessions, right? Define evidence. Or evidence is proof, some sort of proof that would either be, could be circumstantial, it could be material, it could be a lot of different ways to provide evidence. But ultimately, it tends to show whether somebody is guilty of something or not guilty of something. Who has the server? Well, if you've been following the Q Anon narrative, you know that Q has the server, which would lead me to think that the president has the server. I can also imagine that Jeff Sessions has a server. Christopher Wray, John Huber has the server. Why does POTUS continually refer to the server because the mainstream media does not. And also because the server is what everything revolves around. Now, keep in mind, there are likely more than one server, of course. We have out in North Korea, you've got that was set up by Google's Eric Schmidt, likely coughed up over to President Trump. Maybe in exchange for a spot in the Space Force, who knows? But we've also got the Hillary Clinton, the servers that she smashed. You had Imran Awan. He was in charge of servers. There was probably a server out in China. There were multiple servers, but I think the server is kind of referring to the information. And remember, Q has said we have the server. We have it all. Well, why does POTUS continually refer to the server? Like I said, the mainstream media isn't going to talk about this. They'll talk about everything else, but they're not going to talk about the server. And the server is what brings the whole house down. After all, if you were the deep state and you were legitimately going after the president for some sort of legitimate Russian collusion, wouldn't you want to show what was on that server? Wouldn't that be the damning piece of information that would bring the president down? Why would you not want to talk about that? Because we know it's all projection. This is what holds all the insurance files. This is what holds the uranium-1. This is what holds the key to probably the murder of Seth Rich, Antonin Scalia. It holds everything. And POTUS does not speculate. Now, if you'll remember, POTUS has tweeted about the server incessantly. And that POTUS doesn't speculate, meaning that the president, although asking where is the server, it's rhetorical. He knows where the server is, or he doesn't have it. Either way, he's not going to speculate. Now, of course, Q has said that we have the server, so it's to be assumed that the president has the server. The president, of course, just can't come out and declassify everything because that would look partisan. Future proves past. Who has it all? No, we just talked about that. And the future will prove past. All this information we've been talking about for months. Topics stated in the past. Here's months upon months of Q videos that you can look at. All of this stuff that was likely on these servers, maybe at least leading us to the topics that probably are pertinent to what's on the server, has all been discussed here in QAnon posts. Okay, you've got tons of QAnon posts. You've got tons of my videos you can go through. We already know about a lot of this stuff, and we're starting to see it enter the narrative, into the public narrative now. We're just hearing about Huber on Fox News now. But we've known about Huber for a long time, haven't we? Jeff Sessions mentioned it months ago. Future big meaning? Well, there's going to be a lot of big meanings once we can finally concentrate onto the server. After all, that's a lot of data, right? That's a lot of data. Let me take you over here. We are on Pew Research Center, the future of big data. And this is from back in 2012. Tens of millions of connected people, billions of sensors, trillions of transactions now work to create unimaginable amounts of information. An equivalent amount of data is generated by people simply going about their lives, creating what the McKinsey Global Institute calls digital exhaust. Data given off as a byproduct of other activities such as their internet browsing and searching or moving around with their smartphone in their pocket. Let me take you down here. In March 2012, let me see if I can blow that up for you. It's a little better. In March 2012, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP, announced a big data research and development initiative, reporting that 6 U.S. government agencies would spend more than $200 million to help the government better organize and analyze large volumes of digital data. The project is designed to focus on building technologies to collect, store, and manage huge quantities of data. OSTP wants to use the technology to accelerate discovery in science and engineering fields and improve national security and education, the White House said. Well, how could big data be significant? A 2011 industry report by Global Management Consulting from McKinsey argued that 5 new kinds of value might come from abundant data. 1, creating transparency in organizational activities that can be used to increase efficiency. 2, enabling more thorough analysis of employee and systems performances in ways that allow experiments and feedback. 3, segmenting populations in order to customize actions. 4, supporting human decision making with automated algorithms. Hang on. Replacing or supporting human decision-making with automated algorithms. And 5, innovating new business models, products, and services. Let me take you down here. Services like Facebook and Google Plus may help us to understand a lot more about our lives and our relationships than we did before these services came into existence. But Facebook's view into our lives and how our various social circles interact will always be clearer than will ours. The question becomes, who else gets to look through that microscope? Listen to that again. But Facebook's view into our lives and how our various social circles interact will always be clearer than will ours. And that's a scary thought, isn't it? There are dangers associated with this phenomenon. MoveOn.org President Eli Pariser, in his recently released book, The Filter Bubble, describes it as a type of informational determinism, the inevitable result of too much web personalization. The filter bubble is a state where what you've clicked on in the past determines what you see next. A web history you're doomed to repeat. You can get stuck in a static, ever-narrowing version of yourself, an endless U-loop. Google and Facebook are the most obvious offenders. They're conspicuous because they're using that data to vend services to you. But you can always opt out of using Facebook, as millions already have. And while cutting Google out of your life isn't as easy as it was a decade ago, there are ways to use Google anonymously and indeed to find information without using it at all. There are networks that we opt in or out of. Okay, so this is a long article. It's a great article from back in, 2012, right? And this really talks a lot about the importance of data, and that's what all this is, right? Topic stated in the fast. Future big meaning. Well, it sounds like we're going to get a really big data drop. And isn't that what really all this is? I mean, what is QAnon other than data? And all these major companies, Google, Facebook, Twitter, all they do is reinvest back in what? Data collection. Facebook was caught stealing your data. Twitter, shadow banning your data. YouTube, shadow banning data by blocking channels. And that's all this is. What is the IG report? A bunch of data, text, messages, communications, phone calls, data. Who keeps all that data? Well, the NSA does. So I would imagine that the NSA also has the server, no? And there's a new NSA building, new NSA director. How about that? Clean house. Think Twitter. Repeat's important. Think Twitter. And I think this goes back to President Trump, repeating over and over about this Imran Awan. Repeating over and over. Where is the server? Where is the server? It's the same as any hit song. You got to repeat that chorus. Get it stuck in your head. After all, the mainstream media isn't going to help him get his message out to the masses. And this is one of the most popular presidents of recent time. And he can't get his own message out because the mainstream media won't allow that. Now, apart from a few channels here and there, it's out there. But Twitter is an incredibly useful tool. We talked a lot about that yesterday, the power of Twitter. And that's why I'm on it. That's why I'm using it more and more, because the president does. And if the president can use the power of Twitter to create this movement, to get people riled up enough to want to release this server, then eventually it will be the logical thing to do, and he can drop the hammer. Those awake see that. Those who have been following this channel, other channels, QAnon, whatever, if you've been paying attention to what's really going on, this is the next logical step. All these things that are playing out right now, we've known about for months. We've been waiting for it to happen. We've been impatiently waiting for it to happen. And now it is happening step by step, but it's getting a little bit faster. That snowball is getting bigger. And those are asleep that are still blind. And once again, the discord that we have in our nation, sadly, is more about data. It's not like we have this known quantity and we're disagreeing vehemently on it. There are millions of people, not just in our country, but around the world, that are still asleep because they're not getting the proper data. Why? Because they're watching fake news. And that's a propaganda arm of the Democrat and the deep state, and that's failing. Shoot. CNN is tanking. Home and Garden's channel is killing CNN right now. And that's creating a panic. And that's why we're seeing, particularly, the ones who did the leaking. Because they're the ones that are going to go down next. The Clappers, the Comeys, the Brennans, Rice. You see what I'm saying? McCabe. All these are the people that leaked. They're the ones that will go down next. And that creates a massive panic. And let's take a look at some of that panic in a montage.
The president wants to silence his critics, period. And maybe he thinks this is a way to do it. Maybe he can say, well, they don't know what they're talking about if they don't have clearance anymore.
The idea that the president would be revoking security clearance, not based on wrongdoing, just based on words, is shameful.
Well, but I'm not comfortable with vindictiveness, because to me, that's very dictator.
Well, that's his middle name.
He represents the office of the presidency of the United States. This threat sounds more like he leads Turkey or the Philippines, not like he leads the United States of America.
Let's be honest what this is about, Willie. This is an abuse of executive power. This is Erdogan's Turkey. This is not what the United States of America should be.
This is so extraordinary. The last thing you want in intelligence is partisanship.
Make no mistake, that's the only thing this is about, is a cowardly action of someone who is afraid of criticism.
Well, that sounds like panic to me. I think my favorite part is little Adam Schiff there, talking about cowardly, because that's ironic. Well, all that speech is silver, but silence is golden. And Q has now been silent for 20 days. But over those 20 days, we've seen about 2 months worth of Q posts come to light now in this outward mainstream media narrative. And although it's a little bit asinine, it's important. Remember, this is all a race up until midterms, and that's an important aspect of this all. President Trump has never really stopped campaigning since he was inaugurated, if you think about it. And that silence is golden. Allows the deep state to question what's going on. Sometimes disinformation is necessary. But this is all leading back to Huber. And as we see Huber come into the public narrative, now we know that this is moving forward. Now, knowing what we know, let's take a look at this post again and read it the other way. Silence is golden. Panic. Fake news failing. Those asleep, blind. Those awake, see. Think Twitter. Repeats important. Future big meaning. Topic stated in past. Who has it all? Future proves past. POTUS does not speculate. Why does POTUS continually refer to the server? Who has the server? To find evidence, who does Huber report to directly? From sea to shining sea, which is precisely where Huber will be allowed to operate. Let's move on to the next post. Post 1683, 38 minutes after the hour 11. Q says you have more than you know, and then gives us this link here. And we talked about this criminal referral back in April, probably April 19th or 20th. You would have seen this. But let's go back over it. And this is a letter to Jeff Sessions, Christopher Wray, and John Huber. Dear Attorney General Sessions, Director Wray, and Mr. Huber, we write to refer the following individuals for investigation of potential violations of federal statutes. In doing so, we are especially mindful of the dissimilar degrees of zealousness that has marked the investigations into former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the presidential campaign of Donald Trump, respectively. Because we believe that those in positions of high authority should be treated the same as every other American, we want to be sure that the potential violations of law outlined below are vetted appropriately. Now remember, this was back in April. So this has been going on for some months now. And although the mainstream media isn't going to talk about it, this is the real deal. This is the Whopper with cheese. As far as we're concerned, because this is what's going to lead us to criminal prosecutions. So who's up in this? Well, we got number one, former FBI Director James Comey. On July 5th, 2016, Comey made a statement on the investigation of Secretary Hillary Clinton's use of a personal email system, during which he stated there is evidence that they were extremely careless. Remember, the rewording of that extremely careless was also really important in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. She was negligent. She was grossly negligent. That's what she really was. He went on to say, although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. Incredibly, this judgment appears to have been made prior to interviewing Secretary Clinton and as many as 17 key witnesses, including Clinton's closest aides. Comey's decision to not seek charges against Clinton's misconduct suggests improper investigative conduct, potentially motivated by a political agenda. Accordingly, we refer James Comey to DOJ for potential violations of 18 U.S.C. 1505 and 1515B. Okay, we'll move on. So who else is mentioned in here? Well, we've got Hillary Clinton herself. A lawyer representing the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee paid Washington firm Fusion GPS to conduct research that led to the super spy Steele dossier, according to an October 24, 2017 report in the Washington Post. Accordingly, for disguising payments to Fusion GPS on mandatory disclosures to the Federal Election Commission, we refer Hillary Clinton to DOJ for potential violations of 52 U.S.C. 30121 and 52 U.S.C. 30101. And then we go on to Aunt Loretta Lynch. With regards to former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, we raised concerns regarding her decision to threaten with reprisal the former FBI informant who tried to come forward in 2016 with insight into the Uranium One deal. Accordingly, we refer Loretta Lynch to DOJ for potential violations of 18 U.S.C. 1505 and 1515B. So, Aunt Loretta, who was also getting promised a Supreme Court job, decides to call the whole email investigation a matter. Well, we got number 4, Andrew McCabe. With regard to former acting director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, as reported by the New York Times, Attorney General Jeff Sessions has said that during the internal Hillary Clinton investigation, Mr. McCabe lacked candor, including under oath, on multiple occasions. The report went on to say that is a fireable offense, and that's exactly what happened. He got fired, and Mr. Sessions said that career apolitical employees at the FBI and Justice Department agreed that Mr. McCabe should be fired. Furthermore, the DOJ Office of the Inspector General recently released a February 2018 misconduct report titled A Report of Investigation of Certain Allegations Relating to Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, confirming 4 instances of McCabe's lack of candor, including 3 instances under oath, as well as the conclusion that McCabe's decision to confirm the existence of the Clinton Foundation investigation through an anonymously sourced quote violated the FBI's and DOJ's media policy and constituted misconduct. And then we get down to our lovers, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and we've watched a little bit of that play out in their testimony as well. Let me take you down to number 6. DOJ and FBI personnel connected to the compilation of documents on alleged links between Russia and then presidential candidate Donald Trump, known as the Steele dossier, including but not limited to former FBI Director James Comey, former acting director of the FBI Andrew McCabe, former acting Attorney General Sally Yates, and former acting Deputy Attorney General Dana Buente. With regards to the Steele dossier, we raised concerns regarding the presentation of false and/or verified information to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in connection with the former Trump aide Carter Page warrant application to conduct surveillance through the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And that's FISA. Okay, so you get the idea, and this is basically the Freedom Caucus right here, some members of it. And all of this was presented to us back in April. But it's all playing out this week, isn't it? And now we're finally going to start hearing about John Huber, and that is very, very good news. Let's move on. Post 1684, panic. And it takes us to this right here, Huffington Post link, so you know it's going to be good. The QAnon conspiracy has stumbled into real life, and it's not going to end well. Armed men showing up and demanding answers to conspiracies. That can't be good. No, it can't, Andy Campbell. On June 15th, when he packed his AR-15 and drove an armored vehicle onto the bridge near Hoover Dam, Matthew Wright had a mission. He gleaned it from a berserk conspiracy theory that circulates mainly online. And now here he was offline near a very real dam with a not-at-all virtual rifle. As he blocked traffic, he held up a sign. Release the OIG report, it read. He wanted the same thing that so many others that subscribe to the all-encompassing QAnon conspiracy theory want. Some sort of proof of a deep state conspiracy run by the liberal elite in Hollywood to commit and then cover up an array of atrocities, from child sex trafficking to false flag shootings. And they thought they would find at least some damning evidence in the Department of Justice Inspector General report on the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And I'm going to stop right there before I get sick. So, this Andy Campbell, who clearly must be a Q expert, is talking about this Matthew Wright, who just hopped into his armored vehicle like we all are, want to do every once in a while. Drive on up to the Hoover Dam, start sowing our oats. released the OIG report, which is not a conspiracy theory. It's actually playing out in the news. And the finding of damning evidence is growing more and more, which is why we have the immediacy of this article. So you see what's going on, Andy Campbell. Look at me with your smug look. I would suggest that next time you go popping off about Q, you might want to ask somebody who knows something about Q, like myself or somebody else. Somebody who's read Q, but instead you decided to wing it, didn't you, Andy Campbell? This is not going to age well for you, and I'm going to see you on Twitter. So you see what's going on. Linking all these people that had nothing. This Matthew Wright had nothing to do with QAnon, didn't mention QAnon. And they link it to Pizzagate, and they just start throwing out everything. The Daily Beast, Will Sommer, wrote a great primer on the theory. No, he didn't. Will Sommer's he's never even read Q. It essentially goes like this. Q started posting weird messages on 4chan last November, leaving breadcrumbs for the online masses to find evidence that several top Democrats are about to be sent to Guantanamo Bay. Special counsel Robert Mueller is actually investigating Hillary Clinton, etc. Nobody knows who Q actually is, and there's no evidence that the person or persons posting under that handle has or have any high-level security clearance. It's easy to roll your eyes at the QAnon conspiracy theory. Yeah, because you don't know anything about it. It's easy to roll your eyes at anything you don't know anything about. Then they go on to talk about Pizzagate as being lunatics. You see what's going on. But what's more importantly here is that they're taking the immediate news that is really, really damning, and they're turning this into a situation where it's no longer amusing. Now it's dangerous. Armed men showing up and demanding answers to conspiracy theories? Nah, that hasn't happened, has it? That hasn't happened. But according to Andy Campbell, expert on Q, he decided to go ahead and stick it all together in this article. So you see what's happening. We're not going to spend any more time on this. They're panicking. This is why. Andy Campbell, you're a clown. And we're going to talk on Twitter. Let's move on. Post 1685. Q adds on. Now do you understand why mirrors and disinformation is necessary? Logical thinking. And then we have 20 in brackets. Q. Well, I know a lot of you guys get into the serial brain decodes, and I think they're fantastic. There's a lot of talk about mirrors and things like that, and that I don't want to go into that because I think it's already really well explained. There's a couple people that do it really well. Shout out to War Drummer. Really nice guy. Does a great job over there. And so I'm not really going to add on to that. You guys can go search that out if you don't know what I'm talking about. But to me, this is all indeed smoke and mirrors, disinformation. And part of that involved a 20 days of silence. We've had 20 days now of silence. And the deep state's been panicking. But you know what we haven't had a lot of? We haven't had a whole lot of false flags. So when they don't hear about it, because remember, the deep state is following QAnon too, whether they want to clown it or not. They're following. Logical thinking would say that when you're making big moves, you are not going to want to flag those moves. So that would be my assumption. Now, we heard 20 years being brought up in President Trump's VFW speech, and I want to refer you to a video here where he's talking about George Brett.
George Brett of the Kansas City Royals. Where's George? He's around here somewhere. I said, George, how many years? 20. What was your batting average? 305. I said, that's pretty good. 305 for 20 years. Special.
So there you go. President Trump makes a couple references there. 20 years. 305. Could have just been talking about the batting average of George Brett. Doesn't seem obviously unlikely. George Brett was there after all. But Q says, now do you understand why mirrors and disinformation is necessary? Logical thinking, 20 in brackets Q. Well, like I said earlier, it's been 20 days since Q's last post. And Q's last post involved disinformation. Mirrors, look here, look there. Remember, we're not the only ones following. The deep state is following as well, too. Hence, all the information regarding the reflections and the arrangement of the mug inside of Air Force One. All mirrors and disinformation. And 20 days without any of that information, nothing leaking, nothing getting out, puts the deep state in a big, big panic. Because they're not sure how to react. They're not exactly sure where to place their false flags. I think you see where I'm going with this. Now, incidentally, the 305, that used to be Broward County. I don't know if it still is, but it used to be Broward County, area code 305. Let's move on to the next post. Post 1686, 28 minutes after the hour of 12. We get this YouTube link here, and this is Judge Napolitano talking about John Huber. Give it a listen.
So look, the Attorney General appoints the Chief Federal Prosecutor for Utah to investigate three things. The exoneration of Mrs. Clinton before all the evidence was in. Right. The exoneration of President Clinton and Secretary Clinton on Uranium One before all the evidence was in. And the abuse of FISA by the FBI and the DOJ. So this guy is in Utah. If he comes to Washington, D.C., and gets a half dozen federal prosecutors assigned to him and a dozen or so FBI agents assigned to him, he is a de facto special counsel. Sure. He's doing what needs to be done. He'll impanel a grand jury. They'll present evidence to the grand jury. The grand jury will issue subpoenas. If the subpoenas don't work, they'll go to a federal judge and get a search warrant. That's the way it's supposed to work. If he stays in Utah, he cannot impanel a grand jury in Utah to examine something that happened in D.C. All the evidence is in D.C. You're examining NSA, FBI, DOJ, present and past. The Utah grand jury does not have jurisdiction over events in D.C.
So he's going to make a road trip.
Correct. He will be toothless if he stays in Utah. Remember what Comey did when they investigated Mrs. Clinton. Where was the grand jury? There wasn't one. I've never heard of an effective federal criminal prosecution without a grand jury. You present evidence to the grand jury, you get the grand jury to issue a subpoena. If you need a search warrant, the first thing the judge is going to say, as I used to say, is, well, did the grand jury try and get this by subpoena? It didn't work? You don't have a grand jury? What kind of an investigation is this?
Why did Sessions appoint Huber? What do we know about him?
We know that he is not part of the internal DOJ hail fellow, well-met crowd. And to that extent, it's a good thing. But this distance between Utah and D.C. is going to be troublesome. And if you read the letter that Jeff Sessions sent, it said he's going to stay in Utah. He cannot, from Utah, run a grand jury and an investigation 2,500 miles away.
He could use some of Mitt Romney's miles.
Yes.
Because he's got to stay in Utah and Mitt can't travel as much. All right, so Robert Mueller, let's go back to that investigation. So what do you think about the accusation that he's not being transparent enough about his investigation and his approach? I thought secret was his goal.
Yes, I disagree with that allegation. I know it's being made by politicians who are impatient with the pace of the investigation.
So are Americans, by the way.
They are. I'm impatient, and I do this for a living. But look, the theory is if somebody is exonerated, you don't want any bad evidence about them out there because that will stick.
Sure.
And if somebody's going to be prosecuted, you want to gather everything you can before you pull the trigger. These things take time. I've said this before. Picture this as a 10,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and there are parts that are done and parts that aren't done, and we have to wait until it's completed before you can decide where he's going to go.
And these news leaks are not coming from Mueller's team. They're coming from attorneys representing different people who just start blabbing.
Yes.
There you go, Judge Napolitano kind of laying it out for us. Q goes on to ask, does FOIA cover FISA? Well, he gives us the answer here. No, it does not. FISA is the highest level of classification, and generally Freedom of Information Act has to do with anything that's already been declassified. How did Freedom of Information Act generate redacted FISA regarding, and I'm assuming they're talking about Carter Page here, and this is the New York Times. I'm not going to read you the whole article, but the most important thing is right here. On Saturday evening, those materials, an October 2016 application to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to wiretap Mr. Page, along with several renewed applications, were released to the New York Times and other news organizations that had filed Freedom of Information Act lawsuits to obtain them. Mr. Trump had declassified their existence earlier this year. So you can see that President Trump had already declassified it, and that's how they were able to get these redacted FISA applications regarding Carter Page. Declassification. Who declassifies? Well, the president does. The office of the president. And Q is referring to this section 5.2 classification. And I'm assuming they're talking about this right here. And this is from the National Archives regarding executive orders. Let me take you back down to section 5.2. Information Security Oversight Office. The Information Security Oversight Office should have a full-time director appointed by the Administrator of General Services subject to approval by the President. The director shall have the authority to appoint a staff for the office. B. The director shall 1. Develop in consultation with the agencies and promulgate, subject to the approval of the National Security Council, directives for the implementation of this order, which shall be binding on the agencies. Number 2, oversee agency actions to ensure compliance with this order and implementing directives. Number 3, review all agency implementing regulations and agency guidelines for systematic declassification review. The director shall require any regulation or guideline to be changed if it is not consistent with this order or implementing directives. Any such decision by the director may be appealed to the National Security Council. The agency regulation or guideline shall remain in effect pending a prompt decision on the appeal. Number 4, have the authority to conduct on-site reviews of the information security program of each agency that generates or handles classified information, and to require of each agency those reports, information, and other cooperation that may be necessary to fulfill the director's responsibilities. If these reports, inspections, or access to specific categories of classified information would pose an exceptional national security risk, the affected agency head or the senior official designated under Section 5.3a, Article 1 may deny access. The director may appeal denials to the National Security Council. The denial of access shall remain in effect pending a prompt decision on the appeal. Number 5, review requests for original classification authority from agencies or officials not granted original classification authority, and if deemed appropriate, recommend presidential approval. Okay, so that seems to be what we're talking about here. Now, why was this redacted? Because there's a lot of national security issues here. Keep in mind, active investigations going on, and a lot of that information that is being redacted is evidence in other investigations. Think Huber. And Judge Napolitano just kind of put it all into perspective. Of course, we don't want to have any innocent names getting dragged through the mud, but at the same time, the people that we're going after, until we have all those puzzle pieces complete, and then we pounce swiftly with criminal prosecutions, which is where Huber comes in once again. Now, Judge Napolitano kind of alluded to the fact that this not being a DC lawyer kind of thing is really going to cripple Huber. I would beg to differ, but I do understand why he said that. Keep in mind, he's on Fox News, and he doesn't want to give the whole thing away. He doesn't want to panic the deep state any more than they're already panicked. But let me just rememberize you of this here. This is from this Breitbart article that we've seen so many times. And I just want to read this part right here. As a U.S. attorney, Huber has full authority to impanel a grand jury and to file criminal charges. A grand jury can be impaneled anywhere, which means that it could be a group of citizens from deep red Utah in the heart of Trump country. And keep in mind, that's also where the NSA database is. Instead of the DC swamp that decides whether to hand down indictments for felony prosecution. The Inspector General's jurisdiction extends not only to allegations of legal violations, but also to allegations that department employees violated established practices as well. Sessions added in his letter, which means that the IG report can hold people accountable even for actions that do not violate a specific statute. All right. So Huber is a very, very important piece in this case. And we haven't heard much about him on the news, which is why it should be very, very exciting that we're seeing him come into play in Fox News, because that means that it's going to start happening. It means that they're probably they're probably all ready to impanel a lot of these grand juries, and maybe these grand juries have already been hearing evidence as well. Now, a grand jury they're going to be the ones that are actually going to decide who gets subpoenaed, and then eventually we'll kind of see where some of these cases go. So in a way, Judge Napolitano totally laid it out for us, but he left out some very, very important things regarding Huber, and I think it's very, very important to remember. This is a Utah guy, and he's going to be able to impanel a grand jury anywhere from sea to shining sea. Where we go one, we go all Q. Let's move on. Next post, 1687, 11 minutes after the hour of 1. Q takes us back to a May 15th post that had a whole bunch of links here, and these were all a whole bunch of, they were kind of different, but they talked a lot about Roseanne Barr at the time. She was coming out talking about Q. We're not going to go into those links. Looks like we got batch 2 here, or as Q says, sample 2. All for a baseless conspiracy. Enjoy the show. And we're not going to go through all of these links, but one of these first ones is a Twitter. talking about Apple pulling this conspiracy theory application from the App Store, and they're talking about these Q drops. Now, if you haven't, please check out my video from a couple days ago, dated 7/21. QAnon share this video in Pursuit of Truth presents, and we talk about this MSNBC bit where they were trying to basically debunk Q. And if people are talking about it, this is a great place for a lot of people to start. I think what the real important takeaway here is, and we talked a little bit about this app before. Look, the app itself, I don't know. It might be a great app. It might be a great way for people to get Q on their phone and whatnot. A lot of you guys commented, say that you use the app and that you like it. I'm sure there's probably more than one app, but basically NBC is kind of trying to tie Apple and Google and all this to this sort of grand conspiracy theory kind of thing. And it's just an innocuous app, just like a lot of other apps are as well, too. They probably help quite a few people. And now it looks like Apple is pulling that down. Just another part of banning our free speech as conservatives and Q followers. And then we take you over here. NBC continues the onslaught. Like the fringe conspiracy theory QAnon, there's plenty of merch for sale on Amazon. So they're trying to call us out by saying we're making a bunch of money off this. God forbid we sell a couple t-shirts. Meanwhile, you got Facebook over there that's pumping up these EMP satellites. How much money does that cost? They stole all our data. They make plenty of money. Google makes plenty of money. The guys from Twitter, they all invested over into SpaceX eventually. They're shooting up rockets with their own satellites. And they're complaining over here about some t-shirts and coffee mugs. You see what's going on. Some of us are just trying to keep afloat. Personally, I've made $0 to date, fact, off of Q. But some people are trying to get by, and it's not easy. And so, yeah, they got to sell some t-shirts. Big deal. They're cool-ass t-shirts. Check it out. Where we go one, we go all. I suggest you go buy one in this case. If they're going to pick on it so much, let's make them even more popular. Over here, Daily Beast. What is QAnon? The craziest theory of the Trump era explained. I'm not even going to give these guys a time of day. But here's what I do suggest. If you're looking at something that you'd like to do as far as contributing, I think now that we are playing offense, I think a great thing to do is to call these publications out. After all, they've got tons of Twitter pages and things like that. They got Twitter handles. We can go over there and let them know. Now, if you're not one of those people that knows how to kind of systematically debunk the debunkers, I'd suggest that you don't do that. But if you are able to, and you're able to kind of pick these articles apart, what a great thing. If people are finding this kind of stuff on Twitter, and the next thing they know, they see 20 tweets right under it showing exactly why that article's full of trash. That is a great place for us to start and countering their narrative, because clearly they're stepping up their game. Why would they do that? Well, Q says something big is about to drop. A big drop. And I can't help but think this is just going to be another big, massive data drop. And I don't know if it's going to come through this whole IG hearing. I don't know where this is going to come from. But it sounds like it's going to be big. And that's not just because Q's saying it. These links show it. These major conglomerates would love nothing more than for Q to go away. And the only thing they can really do is try and get out in front and debunk it with this crap right here. So how do we fight back? We call them on it. We show them exactly where and how they're nothing but trash. And that's the way that we can sort of counter this narrative and get to the people who don't know about Q and kind of lead them by the hand and say, at least give them the ability to read Q and decide for themselves. But you see what's going on. These are all the major media sources now. It's no longer a little LARP. Q says all for a baseless conspiracy? Not at all. Enjoy the show. Next post, 1688, 19 minutes after the hour of 1. This Anon posts this YouTube link, and it takes you to that NBC bit that I was talking about. So you can either watch my bit or that bit or whatever, but that's the piece that they're talking about. Q says there's no greater, current in brackets, threat to the American people than the fake news media. I would completely agree. Hashtag controlled MSM. Sounds like Q wants us to get this hashtag going. Study Nazism. Wow, that's a big, big topic.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that. I'm trying to cover some Q here, but that's okay. We'll get the idea. Compare and contrast Antifa. Yeah, you remember Q posted the old flag, the old anti-fascist flag, and he put it right next to the new Antifa flag. It's the same thing. And it's the same idea. It's the same idealistic push for socialism. Compare and contrast, socialism push for rebirth. They're trying to push this age-old ideal that's trash. It doesn't work anywhere. It's never worked. And they're trying to get young, new people to try and represent this as if it's this new fangled idea. And like we're going to walk ourselves right into rebirth of a nation. Well, who financed it all then? The banking families. You know this. Rothschild, Soros, royal family, Prescott Bush. You get it. Who's financing it now? All the same people. George Soros. We could go on. There's plenty of people and plenty of videos, plenty of content talking about all this. All the people who control the money. They're the same people financing the movement now. And it's not going to work. And people are tired of it. Dark to light, good wins. Q. Let's move on to the next post. Now, 1689. An Anon says Q marker. Q says we do try. And I believe Q is referring to this right here.
From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA.
Well, how about that? Where have we heard that before? How about post 1682 from sea to shining sea, just minutes before President Trump stepped on stage. And of course, President Trump drew our attention to that line. As you can see in the video there, he made sure to call attention to that very particular line right there. This Anon says Q marker. Q says we do try. Now, if you've been following Q for a long time, this is no surprise. It's always cool when you see it. But if you are new to the Q phenomenon, we've been seeing this for months. And as much as the mainstream media would love to tell you that it's all about this really, really ethereal and nebulous code breaking, it's really not. This is about direct communication between intelligence and our own president, because the mainstream media won't allow it. And that's why Twitter's been so important, and that's why these Q proofs have been so important. And it's just another one of many reasons why the QAnon phenomenon continues to grow. Q says we do try, and I'd say you do rather well, Q. Bravo. Let's move on. Post 1690, 28 minutes after the hour of 1. Q says you are watching the systematic destruction of the old guard. Power will return to the people. How about that? No longer these globalist elites deciding that they know better how to run our lives and what information we can or cannot have. Imagine that. No more being controlled by our own debt. No more threatening violence against other countries in order to extort money out of us or them or whatnot. Imagine the fall of the mainstream media, where you see the rise of new media, where they can actually, rather than telling you what you ought to think, present some news to you and allow you to think for yourselves what you think about it. It's a beautiful time we live in, folks, and I hope you're excited. It's exciting times. Power will return to the people. Q. Post 1691. Q says, we saw you. God bless, Patriots, and takes us to this Reddit link right here. How boss is that? You can't get a much better Q proof than Q flat out posting your Reddit link saying, we saw you. God bless, Patriots. And those Patriots had a Q sign, honk for Q, and they got their honk. Nothing makes me feel better than watching a bunch of pumped up Patriots. So congratulations to you guys on getting your own personal Q proof. And you can go over to this Reddit link. I'll leave it for you. And reading some of the comments always makes you happy as well, too. Very good stuff. Let's move on to post 1692. Q posts this Twitter link, and says, what a wonderful day. Do you believe in coincidences? And it takes you here to this Lars Prinsen, who posted, what line in the opening song did POTUS point out just 5 minutes after Q's first drop today? And this is talking about the Lee Greenwood song and POTUS pointing that out. Very cool. That was the previous Q proof that we were just talking about. Congratulations to you as well, Lars. I'm sure you're getting a lot of new Twitter followers for calling that out, and Q calling you out. So Godspeed, Patriots. Q says, what a wonderful day. Do you believe in coincidences? Q. We got 2 new Q posts that have come in while I was doing this video, so let's just take a look at them here. Post 1693, and this comes in at 33 minutes past the hour of 9 p.m. Q takes us back to this July 3rd post. Normally, intelligence passed on from a member of the Five Eyes Alliance, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the UK, and the US, to another member comes through an official channel for intelligence sharing. However, Nunes, upon reviewing the document that formally launched the FBI's investigation, said there was no intelligence shared through that official channel, meaning that the intelligence was shared through unofficial means. And that's very, very important because this is the document that launched the FBI's investigation into our president. And that's a big deal. That's got to come through this intelligence agency. And Nunes has said very clearly it did not go through the Five Eyes, meaning it circumvented that. This whole Steele dossier was all drummed up. Now Q takes us down here to a May 10th post. Read below, slow and carefully. Five Eyes. Why do former dignitaries still hold SEC clearance? That's a good question. Why do former FBI and CIA agents still hold security clearance as well, too? I'd love to know. In the U.S. to U.S., that equals logged, flagged, recorded, meaning that if you're going to grab anything that goes through the Five Eyes, it's going to be logged, flagged, and recorded so they know exactly who took it. Well, in New Zealand, apparently it doesn't look like that's the case. No logs, no flags, no records. And around this time, Hillary Clinton was in New Zealand, raising money. Very likely selling more secrets, more information. You can get a U.S. security clearance, authorize Five Eyes View plus doc take. That looks like that is the place where that was happening. Q says, read above, slow and carefully. Why do we allow former dignitaries security clearance? Well, I'd love to know. I'm sure you would too. Q says, welcome to the deep state. Future to prove past. So as we get more and more information, it looks like that's what's happening. We're starting to see, and of course we all know that this FISA application was not valid in the first place, but it's playing out in the mainstream media. We're starting to see that. And so now it looks like it's going to tie this to our connection in New Zealand, our Five Eyes connection. And let me take you over here. This is off of Business Insider, May 29th. China's Communist Party has so much power in New Zealand that Western countries might stop sharing intelligence. A former CIA China expert proposed cutting New Zealand out of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangement with the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. The ex-analyst said the action should be taken in response to New Zealand's Prime Minister's denials of any influence attempts by the Chinese Communist Party. Both Australia and New Zealand have been hosting intense discussions over CCP influence. The Australian media recently confirmed a secret government report that uncovered CCP influence within all levels of politics. And I'll let you read this here because I'm still working on it myself, but I found this very interesting in this case of this Anne Marie Brady. Brady, who has been researching Beijing's overseas influence arm United Front, had her home and office burgled in the last 6 months. Laptops, phones, and a flash drive were taken, and days before one of the break-ins, Brady received a warning letter threatening pushback against those who oppose Beijing. With respect to the reactions, and although the current Prime Minister has said that the attempts to intimidate and to steal materials from scholar Anne Marie Brady will be investigated, that's a far cry from any sort of productive action, Mattis said. So it looks like New Zealand might have been our weak link in this Five Eyes agency. And as much as the Democrats are trying to prove Russian collusion, we know that it looks more and more like it was the Chinese who was stealing all this information, intellectual property. Remember all this stuff that was going out. It was going to China. It wasn't going to Russia. It was going to China. So I think we're going to see kind of how this unfolds. I don't want to go way into this yet because it's a brand new Q post, but this is sort of what it made me think about whether or not New Zealand is going to stay part of this Five Eyes. We shall see. But it looks like Q is directing our attention towards New Zealand and what was going on in New Zealand and why. It looks like that was the free zone there where there are no logs, no flags, no records. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear in the next 48 hours this all coming to light in regards to the FISA application. Let's move on. Post 1694, we get this. And this is a very, very interesting link. Takes you to the CNBC article from July 20th. And I want to read this whole thing because this is great. Dick Bove, Trump poised to take control of the Federal Reserve. President Donald Trump has multiple reasons as to why he should take control of the Federal Reserve. He will do so both because he can and because his broader policies argue that he should do so. The president is anti-over-regulating American industry. The Fed is a leader in pushing stringent regulation on the nation. By raising interest rates and stopping the growth in the money supply, it stands in the way of further growth in the American economy. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve is required to have 7 members. It has 3. 2 of the current governors were put into their position by President Trump. 2 more have been nominated by the president and are waiting confirmation by the Senate. After these 2 are put on the Fed's board, the president will then nominate 2 more to follow them. In essence, it is possible that 6 of the 7 board members will be put in place by Trump. The Federal Open Market Committee has 12 members and sets the nation's monetary policy. 7 of the 12 are the members of the Board of Governors. 5 additional are Federal Reserve District Bank presidents. Other than the head of the Fed Bank in New York, who was nominated by the president, the other 4 can only take their positions as district bank presidents if the board in Washington agrees to their hiring. One of these, the Fed Bank president in Minneapolis, Neil Kashkari, is already arguing for no further rate increases. Following the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act in July 2010, the Fed was given enormous power to regulate the banking industry. It moved quickly to implement a number of new rules. The Fed set up a system that would penalize banks that failed to obey its new rules. These rules included setting limits as to how big an individual bank could be, how much money the banks had to invest in Fed funds and treasuries as a percent of their assets, which loans were desirable and which were not, where the banks had to obtain their funding, and many, many more, up to and including how much a bank could pay its investors in dividends. These rules have meaningfully slowed bank investments in the economy, the Volcker rule, and they have had a crippling effect on bank lending in the housing markets. Other agencies have had an impact here also. Thus, of all the government agencies, the Fed has been possibly the most restrictive. The president has already moved to correct these excesses by putting in place a new Fed governor, Randall Quarles, to regulate the banking industry. In the second quarter of 2018, the growth in non-seasonally adjusted money supply, M2, has been 0. That's right, the money supply did not grow at all. This is because the Fed is shrinking its balance sheet, ultimately by $50 billion per month. In addition, the Fed has raised interest rates 7 times since quarter 4, 2015. Supposedly, there are 5 more rate increases coming. This is the tightest monetary policy since Paul Volcker headed the institution in the mid-1980s. It will be recalled his policies led to back-to-back recessions. Current Fed monetary policy is directly in conflict with the president's economic goals. Moreover, the Treasury is estimating it will pay $415 billion in interest on the federal debt in this fiscal year. A better estimate might be $450 billion if rates keep going up. There are a lot of bridges and tunnels and jobs that could be created with this money. Then there is inflation. It is likely to rise if the Fed eases its policies. If that happens, paying down the federal debt becomes easier. On a less desirable note, higher interest rates lower real estate values. Lower rates that stimulate inflation increase real estate values. The president can and will take control of the Fed. It may be recalled when the law was written, creating the Federal Reserve, the Secretary of the Treasury was designated as the head of the Federal Reserve. We are going to return to that era. Like it or not, the Fed is about to be politicized. Well, this is an extremely big deal, and I'm very curious to see how this is all going to play out. The Federal Reserve, of course, is not federal at all. It's about as federal as Federal Express, right? And nationalizing this, or they say politicizing this, could be a very, very interesting choice. And I would love to know what you think about it. I've yet to kind of make my decision. Now, this article is from July 20th. So we've had it for a few days, but I must admit this is the first that I've seen this, and I had a suspicion that Trump was going to move towards doing this anyway. Now Trump has a few choices to go with here. He's going to nominate some governors. I wouldn't be surprised if Q is putting this out because that's what's going to happen. If we're going to start seeing some nominations come down the pike, we shall see. It's a brand new Q post, but it looks like Q is directing our attention here. Now keep in mind, These last two Q posts, because they're so new, I'll probably end up covering them in the next videos, as well as we may see some more information come out in the mainstream media over the next 24 to 48 hours. So we'll see how that works out. But let me know down below, should we abolish the Fed? Should we nationalize the Fed? What would you do in this situation? And how important do you feel it is to get a fresh new start with the Federal Reserve? President Trump, of course, is very anti-regulation, so it remains to be seen who he's going to nominate on there. That's all I got for you as far as Q posts go. I'm going to leave you with one more quick story. This is off the Daily Mail. Claire Bronfman posts $100 million bail in NXIVM sex cult case. Claire Bronfman was arrested on racketeering conspiracy charges on Tuesday morning and pled not guilty in court. She was put on house arrest and given an electronic monitoring bracelet after posting $100 million bail. Can you imagine posting that much bail? The heiress to the Seagram liquor fortune, 39, is accused of running a pyramid scheme in order to enrich Keith Raniere, the leader of NXIVM. It was Claire and sister Sarah who helped woo Allison Mack when she considered joining NXIVM, with the two said to have put $150 million into the cult over 15 years. Bronfman, 39, is the youngest daughter of Edgar Bronfman Sr., the former head of Seagram, who was worth $2.4 billion at the time of his death. She and her sister Sarah have 5 half-siblings from their late father's first marriage, including Edgar Jr., the former CEO of Warner Brothers. Bronfman is British Chariots of Fire actor Nigel Haver's stepdaughter, as her mother wed the star after her second divorce from Edgar Bronfman Sr. Big deal, big arrest. I have a feeling this is going to lead to a lot more NXIVM arrests. These two pumped $150 million into this cult. So this was a serious, serious deal. And Allison Mack most certainly could not have been the biggest arrest coming from this thing. And we knew that. We knew Bronfman was probably going to go down, and it looks like that is the case. So this is very, very exciting stuff, and I have a feeling this is going to lead to a lot more arrests. And keep in mind, like I said, we're going to cover more about these posts in probably the next video, as I have a feeling that over the night Q is probably going to post a lot more information in regards to this. But I have a feeling we might see some more some nominations to this Federal Reserve. And we're going to get probably more information in regards to New Zealand's role in this Five Eyes situation and how that has to do with the application for the FISA warrant. There you go. That's all I got for you today. Please do me a favor. Won't you join me on the Twitter? My Twitter handle is at IPOT1776. That's at IPOT1776. And of course, you can also find me at Gab. I'm on BitChute, although I don't post a lot on BitChute. Not yet, but I do have a BitChute in case it all goes down. And I'm also on Real.Video.net. I will be posting on that and Gab as well, too. But if you want to talk to me a lot quicker or get messages to me, you can always email me at INPOT76@gmail. And of course, that'll be down in the video description below. And follow me here at Twitter. Join in the conversation. That's all I got for you today. My name is Sir Patrick Mack. And until next time, stay off drugs and stay in school.